session in the chat. So please do join us if you're free at 4 o'clock. And that's one of the sessions that won't be recorded. So if you want to be there, you need to be there live. So I've got 4 speakers with me today. We have Stuart Wheeldon, who's just left local authority to come and work with us here at OPSS. Really happy to have Menelik Shillingford from the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you, Menelik. I've got another Stuart Radnage from London Trading Standards. And finally, really happy to have John Bennett here from Lewisham Council as well. So without further ado, I will start the session, and please do get involved in the chat if you have any comments or questions as we go through. So thanks for joining. This week is all about shared learning, and this session has come about following some learning that I've personally been doing as part of a work-based MBA apprenticeship that we do, or some of us do here at OPSS. So the second module that I took was all about collaborating with customers, and it prompted me and my team here at OPSS to do some thinking about who our customers are, how we listen to the voice of our customers, and how we work to understand and meet their needs. So being very honest, before I started the module, I hadn't really considered all the different stakeholders that we work with here in local delivery as our customers. But I started to think that, yeah, we're a public sector organisation spending public money, and we're using that money to deliver a service. So we need to understand and serve the needs of the many stakeholders or customers that we have. So one of the first things that our team did was to start to think about our customers and identify who they actually are. And our initial thoughts were that they're basically everybody that we provide a service to. But thinking of customers in that very broad way is not particularly helpful in understanding the needs of our many differing customers and ensuring that our service meets the needs of those differing groups. And if you take a look at any modern marketing literature, it'll advocate grouping together customers in segments who share similar characteristics and have similar needs so that you're better able to serve them. So we thought about how we could do some top-level segmenting of our customers, and many of you here today are our customers. So whether you're from a local authority, regulatory service, you act as a primary authority, you're from a business, or you're from another government department, you're all important customers to us. If I can go to the next slide, please, Nick. Yeah, has that moved on? Thank you. Oops. So I'm going to talk to you today about some of my new thinking around customers and touch on some thoughts on inclusive services. I'm going to draw on some of the work that the newly formed Strategic Regulatory Network in London has undertaken, and then I'll be handing over to our 4 other speakers who'll share their experiences of how they've aimed to listen to their customers' voice and shape their services accordingly. So we do hope you enjoy this short session today. If you're from a regulatory service and you feel you have examples of how you're responding to customer needs and having a customer-focused service, we'd really love to hear from you. I'll give you my contact details at the end of the session, and I'm also going to share a few resources and bits of literature that I found interesting and helpful too. Next slide, please, Nick. So, thinking about regulatory services, I just wanted to ask the question, who do you see as your customer? And you can post some thoughts in the chat. So if you just think very quickly, who are your customers in regulatory services? Just off the top of your head, who do you think they are? So just have kind of 30 seconds to do that. Oops. Okay, chat looks quiet. There we go. So thanks, Stuart. Those engaged with what we deliver. Okay. Any others? Okay, large and small businesses, the public, members of the public. Great. The regulated, yeah, okay, thank you. Businesses, consumers, councillors, residents, thanks, Matthew. And public, elected members, businesses, thank you. Other teams in the local authority, thanks, Stuart. Businesses, workers, residents, and visitors to the square mile. Thanks, Tony. Hello, Ian. Nice to see you as a PA provider, partners, other regulators, and OPSS. Great, thank you. I can go to the next slide, please, Nick. So I did a bit of thinking about possible customers of a local authority regulatory services, and they were very much in thinking with many of those comments that we've got in the chat there. So these were the ones at the three at the forefront of my mind. So business, consumers and the general public, and other organisations and partners and authorities that we work with in local authorities. So we're the Department for Business and we're limited on time today. So can I go to the next slide, Nick, please? Thank you. So this next question is really just focusing on your business customers, and it's really just a prompt to have a think about the services that you provide to your business customers. So there'll be some services that they simply don't have a choice over, but some services that they do. For example, they might come to you for compliance advice and support, and in some authorities, whether they choose to take up any paid for services that you offer on a discretionary basis. So again, if I can ask you just kind of 30 seconds or so, thinking specifically about the businesses in your authorities, what services do you currently provide to that specific customer? I can go back to the chat. Thanks, Vincent. So advice on compliance. Consultancy, audits, HACCP plans, pre-inspections, training, COVID compliance. Thank you, Paige. So sounds like you're very busy with your business customers. Nick, we know you are up in Greater Manchester. So PA, bespoke compliance advice and support workshops, signposting. Lisa, similar food hygiene compliance advice, health and safety advice, signposting, COVID compliance info, pest control training. Great. So so thank you for having a little think about that. If you haven't yet, we've got Tony, regulatory advice on compliance, good practice, industry support, primary authority. Ian again, expert advice, guidance, support, clarity, and a one-stop shop. Brilliant. Thank you, Ian. And Timothy, we've got fire safety compliance advice, enforcement support, help reduce the risk of harming the public, which could ruin their business. Great. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for all of that. Okay, I'll go to the next slide, Nick, please. Brill, thank you. So don't get too worried about the level of detail in this model. And you might want to feel sorry for my team, who I have kind of had a session to work through this model with them. But our team actually found this gap analysis model quite useful when we were thinking about our own customers and the service we provide to them. So I did just want to share it with you today. You might like it or not too. But the model basically takes us through a number of potential gaps that can affect service quality. And our team focused on gap one, which is basically a failure to understand what the customer expects from the service. And it prompted us to think about how well we actually listen to the voice of our customers. So how well do we actually know what they want or expect from us? We asked ourselves how we've tried to establish what many of you, our customers, actually want from us in local delivery. We did a bit of brainstorming and we identified several ways that we provide opportunity for feedback and how we engage with you to shape our service. But we also realised that we could approach this differently in the future. For example, instead of just asking you, we could actually spend some time with you to better understand what your needs are. We could get a bit closer to you, and we should also perhaps consider how we could better use technology to understand our customers a little bit better. I'll go to the next slide, please, Nick. And again, it's just a little bit of a prompt, if I can. How do you listen to the voice of your customers? So what do you do to actually understand what the needs of your business customers are? What tools do you use, or what approaches do you use to listen to the voice of your business customers? So again, we'll just have 30 seconds or so thinking about that. Okay, Sarah, thank you. So mainly face-to-face regulatory visits. We know we need to improve on this. So thanks, Sarah. Programmed review and catch-up meetings, formal annual reviews, impromptu discussions, being available, open, approachable is key for me, Kate. Thank you, Ian. Seeking feedback via SurveyMonkey, end-of-year reviews, one-to-ones, catch-ups, regular meetings, asking for feedback from Nick. So thank you. Asking for customer feedback, providing contact details, encouraging inquiries, during face-to-face, easily contactable. So thank you. That's great. Thanks. Yeah, certainly when we started thinking about it, we did kind of reflect, do we truly know what our customers expect from us or want from us? And how do we go about establishing that? And there's asking them and understanding what their stated needs are, what they say they want. But there's probably also some latent needs. So the things that people don't always articulate. And we were trying to think, how could we better understand those? Right, let me just go back. So thanks. We've got 4 speakers coming up who'll be sharing their thoughts on understanding their customers and listening to their voice. And I'm hoping for some reflections about how they might approach that in the future as well. But before I hand over to our speakers, can I go to the next slide, please, Nick? Thank you. I just wanted to share a few thoughts on why I think understanding our customers and listening to the voice of different customer segments is so important. And that's to do with our services being inclusive. So as you can see from this slide, inclusive services ensure that everybody who interacts with the service does so as easily as possible. Any barriers are identified, and regardless of a customer's characteristics or access needs, it can be navigated by all users. And we can't ensure that if we don't know our customers well. Next slide, please, Nick. Thank you. So I just wanted to share briefly a snapshot of the work that the London Strategic Regulatory Network's doing to establish how well local authority regulatory services in London understand their business customers, with a specific focus on diversity. So the SRN carried out a survey of all London boroughs asking what diversity information was held in relation to businesses. So, for example, what data is held on businesses who access support, and what data is held in relation to businesses who have enforcement action taken against them. And as you'll see from the slide, there were actually very few authorities who recorded any diversity data in relation to businesses operating in their areas or when they provided services to businesses. And next slide, please, Nick. And when officers and managers were asked about their understanding of the diverse businesses in their communities, there was some good news. And the majority of officers and managers said that they felt they had a good understanding of the diverse businesses operating in their local authority areas. Next slide, please, Nick. However, 40% of officers that responded to the survey in London, and we had 83 responses, identified gaps in their understanding of diverse cultures, communities and businesses in their local authorities. And on the slide, you can see that these gaps included in relation to different cultures, cross-cultural behaviours and customs, for example. Next slide, please, Nick. So I'm going to finish speaking now with some final thoughts that our head of local delivery, Catherine, recently prompted colleagues in local authorities to think about at a session that we had at Oxford University. So if we're serious about designing inclusive services, the questions on the screen now are worth, I say, having a think about. They're largely concerned with thinking about how well you know your customers, whether you've identified any particular customer segments, and how well you understand the needs of those customer segments. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague, Stuart Wheeldon, and Stuart's going to speak about his experience of trying to get closer to and understand the needs of his business customers when he was head of service at a Northamptonshire authority. So thanks, Stuart. I'll hand over to you now.
Hello everybody, and thank you for the introduction, Kate. As Kate mentioned, I now work in the local delivery team for OPSS, but until very recently I worked in local government regulation in Northamptonshire. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience as a regulator and give some examples of the types of business engagement that we used to help understand the needs of our business customers and in turn to help shape development of our regulatory services to best meet their requirements. Next slide, please. And the next one. So we know that regulatory compliance, on top of all the other challenges of running a business, can be overwhelming for some of our business customers. For example, some of you may have been on Joe North's session on Business Insights this morning, where it was mentioned by one of the delegates that a bottling plant had to comply with a mind-blowing 320 regulations. And I think that Munch's screen masterpiece on this slide provides an apt background to represent this, because it was described as depicting a gust of melancholy brought on by a feeling of alienation. I'm sure we've all experienced this feeling at some point, and we wanted to try and alleviate this. So as a county group, when we were in our early stages of setting up the Better Business for All partnership, we asked ourselves as a group, do we have a good appreciation of the challenges businesses face, how they perceive us as regulators, and do we ask them how we can support them to make compliance easier? And through the BBFA process and the tools within it, we became really customer focused, and rather than doing what we thought would help businesses, we started to engage with our customers and to ask them and build an evidence base to design our business support offer. Next slide, please. So we conducted a comprehensive business survey, and that consisted of the 4 elements that are shown on the slide. A business questionnaire, and this was sent to all of our businesses. A proportion were undertaken via telephone, by non-regulatory staff to minimise any influence in the answers. We wanted honesty. We were prepared for some really uncomfortable answers. And during this process, businesses were asked if they would be interested in providing further support to help influence our review of regulatory delivery. Those that did express an interest, we invited to a face-to-face business focus group, along with other business organisations such as the Federation of Small Businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, and the Growth Hub for a structured business insights workshop. And following this, businesses, they were free to walk away, but they were given an invite to sit down on a business steering group to help inform the development of the future Better Business for All projects, business support services and the regulatory delivery review that we were undertaking. We gathered a really valuable insight into our customers through this process, how they perceive the regulator, their fears and their concerns, the things that we did well, but also the things that we didn't. And we soon realised that culture change within the service was required. And in order to help facilitate this, it was imperative for our frontline officers to appreciate this insight. The outcome was to facilitate a trading places event, which is one of the BBFA tools, where pre-arranged informal but structured visits to volunteer businesses by groups of regulators was undertaken, with a set of questions and objectives to achieve during that visit, followed by a regulator workshop to discuss the findings. The focus wasn't on compliance, it was on the business's perception of regulators. What do regulators do that helps and hinders them? And what are the other challenges businesses face, so that regulators got a real feeling for what it's like to be in the shoes of a business. Next slide, please. So from the business survey, we discovered that our business customers viewed us as regulators generally in a really positive light, and they saw us as a trusted source of good advice. However, there's always a however. We also discovered that the way we delivered regulation was at times a great burden, sometimes scary, not always clear and transparent or meeting their needs. And the customers certainly had plenty of ideas of how we could improve this. Ultimately, this business insight that we gathered formed an important part of the business case for the transformation of the regulatory services business support offer in the local authority that I work for. Can I have the next slide, please? So I just want to focus on one small example of where 3 simple questions in a food business questionnaire form the basis for a new business support service. 52% of the businesses responding to this question said that they would most value regulatory support after registering as a food business, but before the initial food hygiene inspection. At the time of this, the initial food inspection was the first time most businesses had verbal contact with a qualified officer in our local authority. Next slide, please. So 64% of food businesses responding to this question said that the most beneficial type of advice for them would be practical advice delivered on site, and 48% said a mock inspection. Next slide, please. 60% of the business respondents said that they would be willing to pay for a 2 to 3 hour pre-inspection on-site practical advice visit aimed at helping them achieve a 5 food hygiene rating. So as a result of this, we utilise this business insight by implementing free pre-inspection telephone advice calls by a qualified officer to all newly registered food businesses, during which they were given the option of booking a Strive for 5 visit, which is what we called our 2 to 3 hour paid for pre-inspection coaching visit. Next slide, please. So here are some further examples of service improvements that were heavily influenced by our direct engagement with businesses. Businesses commented that our website was difficult to navigate, and the business support services offered were often hidden and poorly promoted. This resulted in us facilitating a website workshop with volunteer businesses from the BBFA Business Steering Group to help review and improve the customer journey, and also the development of an online branded commercial regulatory support offer that businesses related to. Businesses also said that post-inspection letters, they took too long to be sent following the inspection. They were often lengthy, not clear, and contained unnecessary legislative jargon. This resulted in simplified handwritten visit reports that were clear, to the point, jargon-free, and were left at the time of the visit. And we also found that ongoing engagement with the customer through feedback forms following service provision was really valuable. Through the positive customer testimonials received, we realised that if a discretionary service added value, then the businesses, they were really willing to pay for it. So we developed a range of other paid for enhanced regulatory support services that add value. So I hope those examples you find that interesting. That draws my presentation to an end. Thanks very much for listening, and please do pop any questions in the chat if you have any.
Thank you very much, Stuart. I'm going to hand straight over to Menelik, if that's okay, Menelik, who's going to join us to give us a perspective from a business support organisation. So thanks, Menelik.
Hey guys, thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. A bit different in terms of what your regulatory service offers, but of course, the London Chamber of Commerce is, brought about where our main base and cause is to serve our members and customers. So there are a few ways that we work very closely with members to identify how best to serve them and to keep that process going on. So I think first of all, it's quite key. And one of the things we do is to identify different groups with different needs. So I recently have become account manager of the Asian Business Association as well as the Black Business Association, but we also have different groups like a hospitality group, construction, education, and within these groups, member companies, businesses have very different aims, objectives, and needs. And we find it key to kind of zero in on these needs. So for instance, with the Black Business Association, one of the key aims and objectives is to break down the barriers to access finance. Now, there's a bit of overlap with the Asian Business Association there too, but their main focus is to promote the success of Asian businesses and to create an active network. So I think one thing that's very key is to have, figureheads of individual groups or demographics to help you clearly understand the benefits that may arise from actually putting a plan in place and what they're trying to achieve. So I think one thing that's very important is to draw up clear objectives and plans addressing some of the issues that are raised by these figureheads. So we have a committee for both the Asian Business Association, the Black Business Association alike, and they act as a medium between the general demographic and audience so that we can really start to collate feedback and understand where there are issues and what needs to be tackled and how we can best serve them. So again, drawing up clear objectives plans is very important. For instance, like address barriers to finance that we've done with the Black Business Association through grant schemes and financing schemes and projects brought on by banks. We've also had feedback that mentoring is very important to younger businesses. So the London Chamber has looked into and will be starting later on this year a mentoring program and an accelerator program for businesses. So it's very much in the spirit of taking that feedback and working out whether there can be a tangible project or result that can be put in place and then acting upon this. I think another area that is very important is monitoring progress of any consideration or project that has begun. So you can really start to understand, one, is it addressing your client or your customer's need? And if not, how this can be improved. So for instance, we have a monitoring process whereby every 3 months we speak to the figureheads, the committee members of each group to understand their views on how the progress is going, what can be improved, what can be changed, and how we should shift our objectives to align more with the current appetite of what we're doing. And I think this type of fluidity is very important because it allows you to actually take constant feedback from your customers and your demographic and really move with them and move with the times, which of course is very important because business is forever changing. Now, as I mentioned, we have committee members to kind of act as a medium. Another thing we do to gain feedback is to create small groups and other committees that fit into different business groupings. For instance, we have a business grouping called the Connected Livable London and also Smarter Cities, which focuses on transport links, how to integrate technology and how to make business run more efficiently using such technology. So we again bring together committees to act as medium between us and the wider demographic of members to understand how best to execute these plans. And also, I mean, again, what issues are current, because you will find that in each different demographic and different grouping of business owner, community, there are different nuances that need to be taken into consideration. And I feel that providing a good solution and really acting in the benefit of your customer is taking on board these smaller nuances and actually addressing them. So again, a big way we kind of look at approaching the wider business community is by running surveys. And I think that's something that many organizations do, and it's quite important. But what we actually do is run a quarterly economic survey, and we've been doing so since 2014. Now, this is putting together a poll of over 500 London businesses, and the data is weighted to be representative of all London businesses by company size and industry sector. The survey provides crucial insight into what's happening in London's businesses community, and the survey results are fed into the HM Treasury, the Mayor of London, the Bank of England, and many other influential policy makers. So not only do we try to act on behalf of our members and customers, but we also provide them a platform to have their voices heard and actually make a real change. And I think there's something really to be considered there. When customers feel like what they think and what they feed back to you is actually making a real change, and there's an effect that it has, it creates that dynamic where they're more open to giving feedback and feel like what's being said is actually having a real effect in their business and the wider business community. So that's something that we have put in place and will continue to do. Another segment of that is our policy team. So we actually allow members of our community to put forward points that they think are very relevant, and that we can start to kind of join APPGs, all party parliamentary groups, and build policy teams to approach government, to have their voices heard, and to actually see if we can make a shift in the way things are done that will benefit our members and the wider business community as well. And we seek to promote and enhance the interest of our members and regularly respond to consultations on calls for evidence by national and local government agencies. I think the theme that I keep coming back to is just a fluid conversation between organizations like us and yours and our key customers, so that they feel like they're being attended to. And also it's a mutually beneficial situation where we gain insight and feedback that we probably wouldn't be able to make up on our own without their input. So I think that's very, very key. Often we put surveys directly to our members that's outside of the kind of policy or the quarterly economic surveys about specific topics, whether our membership benefits are serving them well enough, whether we could do anything better, what type of events would they benefit from, as of course the London Chamber of Commerce is a networking of company as well, and we provide business support. So it's very crucial to understand, what networking events would be beneficial, what do people want to hear about, and who do they want to hear from. So we actually have our own savvy platform / app, keeping up with technology as we do, which allows people to put feedback towards us to raise their own discussions as well, and to give us answers into how we can improve our service. And it's creating these sorts of platforms and facilities and using technology that will allow us to really rapidly gain that insight from our customer base, and then be able to act upon it and also kind of quantify it so that we can measure our responses in coordination of what we are actually hearing. Now, I think a key factor in this kind of circle of allowing businesses and customers to feed back to us is actually promoting their voices and putting them on a platform to actually have their voices heard directly. So we run what's known as the London Business Matters magazine, which is a business magazine based on all of the issues that concern economic growth and business growth throughout London and the UK. We allow our members to publish editorials, thought leadership pieces on what matters to them. So not only is that empowering your customer, your business that you're working with, but also allows us to build a source of thoughts and opinions for others to add to and also to challenge, because again, opinions and thoughts and feelings differ based on different communities. So it's really key to allow anybody's thoughts, anybody's statements to be challenged constructively, and therefore opening future conversations for further improvement and development. And then I think one of the things I want to kind of leave you guys with is the reviewing process. So we can speak to customers, we can try and serve our communities as best as we can, but unless we continually review these processes and try to create an open forum where people are happy to leave feedback, I don't think there can really be any real improvement, because of course we want to be serving our community, so we need to hear from them. So continually looking back on what we've done correctly, what the businesses and customers are saying about what we're doing and how they feel it's actually benefiting them is really key to understanding what will be the next steps. And throughout the chamber, we regularly review these processes to ensure that we continually provide a great service to our members, as they are the base of what we do. And I think that's really key. So again, just to summarize, listening directly to your customer base, drawing up some really clear plans and objectives based on what they've said, executing these objectives, so continually reviewing how well this is going is important, and of course giving your customers a real clear voice to express what's important to them and where they feel concerned.
Super. Thanks so much, Menelik. It's really interesting to hear your perspective. So really appreciate you joining us, and really appreciate all the work you're doing with the London network as well. So thank you.
No worries.
I will move on to Stuart. Another Stuart Radnage, if you're there, please, Stuart, who's going to give us a few words from London Trading Standards. So thank you, Stuart.
Excellent, thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I noticed a couple of the London contingent in the room, so hopefully everything I'm saying you will agree with. So I just wanted to talk about the importance of establishing and actually looking at who your customers are. So I began in London right at the end of June, having worked at Trading Standards Southwest in a similar role. Slightly lesser because the London job was a promotion, but I did that job for 5.5 years, and the Southwest has 14 essentially local authorities who are their customers, and London is made up of 33 boroughs, so the step up is a big leap, but the concept technically is the same. We're always told or hear in life that the customer is always right. At a retail level, if anyone's worked at retail, it's a mantra that is embedded in everyone's very being. It's a simple formula: no customers, no business. And for a regional body like London Trading Standards, it's exactly the same. Without our customers, we wouldn't be able to deliver any of the good that we try to do. It's simple. You would think so. So when I started working for LTS, I started to look at historically the number of projects that LTS delivered and who was taking part. And it became a little bit, I don't want to say repetitive, but it was the same people always on board. And there seemed to be like a core contingent of those that would get involved with projects. And I started to ask myself why. Started to visualize, quite a visual thinker, an imbalance in terms of the scales of people not on board at the top to, sorry, not at the top, not on board at the bottom, to people that are on board. And I think it's quite important when you're a regional body like LTS that the scales are actually quite balanced, or if there is going to be an imbalance, it's because the number of people on board are weighing everybody down, and the number not on board, it's lesser. Now, there are some projects that LTS has run previously that there's a large contingent of those involved with, like the CMP project that we've been running for the last sort of 2 years, coming up to the 3rd year. But what is the issue that's inhibiting people getting on board? So I started to pick up the phone when I started and split the region alphabetically. and was ringing around. And after about 10 conversations, a trend had emerged that ringing everybody wasn't an efficient use of my time or the people that I was speaking with, despite how valuable the conversations were. But there was a genuine common consensus, and the famous Grace Hopper line echoed in my head. And for those of you that are familiar with the quote, you'll know it as soon as I say it, is that the most dangerous phrase in the English language is, "We've always done it this way." And it became apparent that everybody that potentially had held my role previously was just doing as had been done before. And we have a managers meeting in LTS that clearly with 33 members, if everybody had just 10 minutes to explain what is critically important to their borough, the meeting would go on for 5.5 hours. And again, that scales of almost balance would be wrong. 10 minutes for 5.5 hours of your day. And I needed to figure out how we could instill some sort of value or understanding around London in the most effective way. And straight away, I thought of splitting everybody up, splitting the mass. So as you've heard previously, looking for those sort of commonalities, those elements where people have like a shared ethos. And luckily, I managed to figure out that London had previously had sub-regional splits. So we have 5 sub-regions: northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, and a central or inner sub-region. So the first task I presented myself with was to get these sub-regional groups back together. London is a massively busy area, probably understatement of the year. But surely there's commonality between neighbours where there's, 5, 6, up to 8 in a sub-region where they're all sharing boundaries and hopefully issues. And that seemed to be the case. But I actually wanted to strip it back a little bit further. In these meetings, I wanted to ask just 4 simple questions. What are the staffing numbers to establish whether there's any pressing needs in terms of short staffing? What are their priorities? So what are the key deliverables in their borough that's important to their customers, so the borough's customers, the residents? What the attitudes are to regional working, because it's quite good to know if there's been issues in the past. You learn from those mistakes and you don't make those mistakes in the future. And then finally, the simple one of what your attitude is towards regional working as well, because quickly then you can figure out whether people actually are on board with regional working or not. It enables you to really see the wood through the trees, essentially, and to go back to that basic formula of no customers equals no business. It is a simple equation, but identifying who your customers are can be, and usually is, a task in itself. But a big fan of quotes. There's one that I try to live my life by, which is, if it's not you, then who? And if it's not now, then when? I love it because it's all about integrity and acting upon it. By shifting the focus to your customers' needs rather than the output of your operations, you should benefit from understanding everybody's needs, but you have to really want it because people pick up on fakeness, and integrity is really important. And I think the green shoots in London are starting to appear from where we were in the summer. But yeah, you just have to be committed to it because it is an ongoing task, and needs will continue to evolve, and these relationships with the people you work with just needs to be established and continue to be built upon. And I will finish there. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Some really key points there, I think, around integrity and people seeing through fakeness. So thank you. We've got a final speaker, and John, I'm so sorry that we're running a bit late, but it looks like most people are hanging on to hear from you, which I'm really happy about. And I'm really, really glad you're here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from you as well, because you've been doing some excellent work in Lewisham that you're going to tell us about briefly now. So I'll hand over to John. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Kate. And yeah, good to be with you all today. I'm John Bennett. I'm the Head of Economy, Jobs and Partnerships at Lewisham Council. So I don't actually work sort of regulatory services and trading standards and food safety and all that sort of thing. I'm more on the kind of business support and trying to encourage a thriving economy within our borough. But actually, I think there's a lot of sort of similarities in our work, and actually I think kind of teams like ours need to be working a lot more closely together, and we've started to do that in Lewisham, and I'll give you a flavour of some of what we've been doing, because I think, you know, our customers in the sense that we're talking about today, particularly businesses, are the same, and I doubt our customers want to be kind of telling different parts of the council the same thing over and over again. I think it's fair to say that before COVID came along, the business engagement that we were doing in Lewisham was pretty minimal. We had our regulatory services that were going out and doing what they needed to do. We had some kind of a couple of targeted things that we were doing with some local businesses, but actually we didn't have good connections and good relationships, and we weren't good at getting messages out and listening to our businesses. So when COVID came along, we absolutely had to turn that around really quickly. There was a lot of support that we were needing to provide in a really kind of fast-paced and ever-changing situation. One of the things that we did to try and coordinate that was bring together a cross-council group of teams who were business facing. So that was my team, who were sort of doing some of the business support, doing the discretionary business grants. We had the business rates team, planning, but also licensing, food safety, trading standards, partly as well because those teams had pivoted towards doing some enforcement activity as well. You know, at the height of the pandemic, we were meeting for every week and sharing information about what was going on locally, what new changes were coming in, restrictions or support that was available. I think one of the things that group allowed us to do as well was, I kind of mentioned we had some colleagues going out doing enforcement work, making sure businesses were closed when they were supposed to be, or if they were open, they were abiding by social distancing regulations. But rather than just making those teams about enforcement, we also added in an education element to what they were doing and a support element, so that when those officers went in and started talking to the businesses, rather than just going in and saying, oh no, you shouldn't be doing this, you need to change that, actually there was an offer first. We had things like, after the first lockdown was being lifted and things were starting to reopen, we had tote bags, we had posters that people could put up and floor stickers and all that kind of thing. So actually they were going in with a much more positive conversation to start with, and then that allowed perhaps the more difficult bit of, actually you shouldn't be doing that, or you need to have this in place as well. But rather than going in with that from the start, it kind of fostered a much more positive situation right from the start of that engagement. So that was one of the practical things that came out of that group. We continued that group kind of over the last couple of years. We're still meeting now. We're not meeting weekly. I think we're down to monthly now, and in fact I think I've got one this afternoon at 4 o'clock in fact. And it's still really useful as a way of connecting things that are going on around the council to do with businesses. One of the other things that we've done recently, and I think this reflects the point that I think it was Kate who was making earlier about ethnic diversity and ensuring that we're meeting the diverse needs of our businesses and our customers. In Lewisham, it's a diverse borough, a particularly ethnically diverse borough. We're a central London borough, so that might come as no great surprise. We're a borough of sanctuary for refugees, and our mayor wanted to know more about the local businesses, and particularly the ethnic diversity of our businesses. So we did a headcount survey of local businesses, trying to look at business ownership. And what we found through that, we had targeted at our 10 main streets and town centres. This is sort of the first time we were doing it. We worked with our local university. Their student researchers literally went into businesses and tried to have a conversation with people. The findings were that 70% of the businesses that we've got on our high streets and town centres are independently owned, and of those, 2/3 have a Black, Asian, minority ethnic business owner. So that showed that there is still significant diversity in our business ownership base, but there were some interesting findings from the survey, and not necessarily positive things either. What we found was that there is less awareness and uptake of different kind of council-led business support programs amongst Black, Asian, minority ethnic business owners. Black, Asian, minority business owners have more limited contact with the council, and also that there's a lack of trust that authoritative institutions like the council have have the best interests of those businesses at heart. Now that's really quite kind of difficult for us to hear, that we're kind of coming out, we're trying to be positive and trying to support businesses, but hearing some of those messages that actually there's less awareness, there's potentially less trust, is really making us think. That survey work was done a few months ago. We're in the period now where we're like, right, what do we do to respond to that? We're trying to put in place different business support. We're trying to use different channels to reach people. We're finding word of mouth is one of the most important things among some business owners. We've got a newsletter that goes out fortnightly by email. We do run webinars. We work with partners like the Chamber of Commerce and the Federation of Small Business. But actually, I think going out and talking to people face to face and then passing on messages is perhaps particularly important. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to kind of wrap up. I think that the sort of the three things that perhaps kind of the key messages that I'm hoping that I'm trying to reflect on and I kind of want to get across today. I think it's about linking up across council teams. You're not the only ones within the council who are trying to do this, so speak to other people, use a variety of channels to engage with people, and let's be willing to hear some uncomfortable messages as well, and things that perhaps we didn't expect to hear. So on that note, I will wrap up and pass back to Kate.
Super. Thank you so much, John. Personally, really interested in that survey work that you've done. I don't know if you've got anything that you can share with other people who might want to do something similar, so they've got a model to work from, but I can catch up with you separately about that. But thank you. Nick, if I can just go back to my second to last slide, please, to finish off. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, it's that. I think it's going to go now. Yeah, this one. Thank you. So thanks for staying, everybody, first of all. And in summary, the session's been really about encouraging us all to think carefully about who our customers are and how we currently listen to their voice. That segmenting customers into groups who share similar characteristics and have similar needs so that you're better able to understand and serve them can be beneficial. And in order to segment and understand our businesses, then having some data can be helpful in doing that. And we've just heard from John about how they in Lewisham have sought about gaining some data on their businesses on their high streets. When thinking about inclusive service design, knowing our customers and co-designing services with them to meet their needs is essential. We've had 4 very different speakers today talking about how they've approached understanding the needs of their customers. And I'm going to end by sharing in a moment some resources that I found interesting and helpful when I began thinking about how we collaborate with our customers. So thanks very much for listening today. There will be a recording of this session available that will reach you shortly. And I do hope that you are able to join some of the other sessions that have happened this week and are happening again tomorrow. And if not, you're able to watch on video afterwards. So I'll just go to the final slide, Nick, and just remind everybody again that we do have a live briefing at 4 o'clock. You're all welcome to join. And thank you again for staying until the end. And we hope that you took something away from this session today. So thank you.